Namaste and welcome to the second season of Future Fit Corporates. My name is Bhavana Issar and I'm the founder CEO of Caregiver Saathi. In this season, we are going global and shifting the narrative. Caregiving is not a career obstacle or something that organizations must accommodate. It's a leadership accelerator. And through candid conversations with corporate leaders, consultants, and change makers, we explore how caregiving shapes resilience, empathy, and innovation. Let's discover what it truly takes to build workplaces that don't just include caregivers, but recognize that caregiving experience is an asset. Because the future of work is not just tech, female, or inclusive, it's compassionate, it's innovative, and therefore caregiver friendly. Welcome to Future Fit Corporates. Greetings of the day. It is my absolute delight to welcome you to yet another episode of Future Fit Corporates. Future Fit Corporates is a series of conversations that we are having in order to get leaders to think about what it means in this modern day and age to invest in people and continue to nurture success. In today's dynamic corporate landscape, the success of an organization is intricately tied to the well-being and satisfaction of its workforce. And Future Fit Corporates is an initiative aimed at fostering caregiver-friendly workplaces and envisioning future-ready corporate cultures. This initiative seeks to facilitate meaningful conversations between CEOs, leaders, HR heads, thought leaders, consultants, through video interviews, podcasts, and written responses. Our goal is to explore, discuss, and champion the integration of employee well-being into the very core fabric of corporate strategies. So what does it mean to shape caregiver-friendly workplaces? What does it mean to shape gender agnostic, sensitive, inclusive workplaces while we continue to innovate and ensure people performance in changing times? It is my absolute joy today to have with us for this conversation someone I deeply admire and who I have been looking forward to have a conversation with. Welcome, Sukari.
Thank you, Bhavna. It's been something I've been looking forward to as well. So I'm honored to be invited.
Sukari is a cisgender woman. I remember very vividly the first time I heard this term, and we are going to talk about that in a bit. So, and a member of the Black diaspora. She is a heterosexual baby boomer living with a hidden disability and some degree of socioeconomic privilege as a US national. She has no religious affiliation, believing strongly that the universe provides. Sukari is the daughter of a Jamaican immigrant father and a South Carolinian mother, and was raised with one sibling in a working class, multiracial neighborhood in Los Angeles, California. Now residing in Northern Virginia, Sukari has been supporting leaders in both the US and abroad for over 20 years. A little while ago, Sukari educated me that this is a cultural bio. Sukari, we are going to tap into your wisdom to understand what a cultural bio is. And before we get to that, I'd like to tell our audience something that people are more used to hearing about us, which is that Sukari is the owner and CEO of Shiftwork Consulting and a co-author of this amazing book called Fifth Domain Coaching Model. An ICF PCC executive and leadership coach, she also serves as a mentor coach and was the program director at Georgetown University's Institute for Transformational Leadership. With an MSOD and deep expertise in diversity, equity, and inclusion, not just expertise. I think Sukari has deep passion around this subject. Large group interventions and organizational change. Sukari has taught in programs at Georgetown and American University and serves on the board of ACTO, Association of Coaches and Coach Training Organizations. A longtime practitioner committed to social justice and human development, she brings a powerful blend of coaching mastery, systems thinking, and inclusion focused leadership to her work. All of this aside, I have the honor of having Sukari's affection because we are recording the session in December when Sukari typically does not work, and I have the privilege of accessing her time for this podcast. Welcome,
Wow.
Sukari.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Pavna. And the last thing you said about December really does speak to what caregivers need, which is, time for themselves. And
Mm,
so I'd say probably 6, 7 years ago, I
mm,
started just blocking off the entire month of December.
mm,
And I used the time to reflect
mm,
on, my experiences over the course of the year, to really just decompress, giving myself lots of mornings to sleep in and to just, ease into the day, to be reflective about what my learning goals are for the coming year, and otherwise to just eat, drink, and make merry. So that is really how I, as a caregiver, I'm the matriarch in my family. And so I have three wonderful human being children, three adorable grandsons, just really growing into wonderful young men,
mm.
and a partner spouse. And everything's, just kind of seems to gravitate around me. If there's, something that needs to be done, there's some kind of emergency that's occurred, just. And so in that way, I feel I hold a caregiving responsibility for my family, and for the clients I work with. I also feel like the work is really around how do I hold the container for
Yeah,
people to do the work they want to do,
yeah.
in a space that is non-judgmental, and recognizes their gifts.
It's lovely in the way that you have described your association with caregiving and your role as a caregiver. How do you associate with the idea of Caregiver Saathi and the many conversations that we've had? And then we get into the meat of our conversation.
Well, I think Caregiver Sati is just one of the most brilliant ideas that has come into the world recently, because for decades, probably centuries, the role of caregiver always seemed to be thought of as the responsibility, in a
Mm,
bigendered world, for half of the population. And that, well, it's just something, women do, and
mm,
men aren't at all involved in this process, aren't expected to be involved in the process. And what I love about what you've done in creating Caregiver Sati is to really start to help people understand this is a much wider conversation. It's a much broader conversation, even when we think about the term caregiver itself. No, it doesn't mean exclusively you are the person sitting there with someone who cannot care for themselves. Caregiving is really a 360-degree concept. And what I believe you have done with Caregiver Sati is to help people expand their thinking,
Mm,
around what it means to be a caregiver. Just as I've said, it's very clear to me, I am a caregiver.
mm,
Everyone in my world right now, is fairly healthy and mobile. Um,
mm.
and whenever there is an emergency of any kind, something comes up, in the family that needs to be managed, I'm the go-to person, right? So I'm the person who begins to kind of try to explore, well, what will caregiving look like in this particular situation?
Yeah, no, thank you for saying that. That was really generous. You know,
It's true. It's true. This notion needed to be explored for really centuries, and you were just so brave when you decided, I'm going to do this. I see what's happening in my country. You got yourself very curious about, why is this only a woman's thing? And even if it remained, people continue to just think about it. Well, what do these women need? What do caregivers need in order to protect their own health and well-being?
that is true. Sukari, I would like, like I was telling you a little while ago, in your intro, you spoke about a cultural bio, and it is definitely a unique way of introducing yourself. So let's start with that. Let's start with what a cultural bio is and why is this important in your experience? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the cultural bio is a bio I was asked to develop. Oh gosh, maybe back in 2019, when I was going to be presenting. I was with my fifth domain coaching colleague and partner, Amber Mays, and we were going to be presenting our theory and our model and our research around fifth domain coaching, which its shorthand is coaching with social group identity in mind. So it's a competency, a coaching competency that we believe many coaches were never taught in their coach training programs and need to be really, upskilling around. And so we went to this conference and they said, we really would like you to develop a bio that speaks to who you are as opposed to
Mhm.
what you do, right? So the cultural bio, you could, will you read it again so that I can kind of make sure people are getting the context?
Yes. Sukari is a cisgender woman and a member of the Black diaspora. She is a
Okay, so let's
heterosexual.
let's let's so stop there. So cisgender woman, usually I say member of the African diaspora, but member of the Black diaspora is also accurate.
Mhm.
Um, and so those are the identities that for me are most prevalent. That I am a woman who identifies as cisgender, meaning
Mhm.
I identify with the gender I was assigned at birth, which is woman, and that I am a member of this, huge diaspora of folk who originated on the continent of Africa. And these identities are important to me and to who I am, to who I am. And so I privilege them by putting them first in this cultural bio, which really then goes on to explore other aspects of identity that are part of who I am. So please continue.
All right. You go on to say that she is a heterosexual baby boomer
So there
living
I put in my sexual identity so people are clear. I identify as heterosexual.
baby
And I put
boomer.
in my age
Mm,
because my generation is now one of the largest and oldest generations operating globally. And
that's
so,
right.
again, aspects of my identity that I want people to know about me.
Yeah. No, I think it really helps calibrate. So, for example, it helps me understand where you might be coming from.
Mhm.
What is the worldview? What is the times in which you grew up? What has
Absolutely.
influenced you? And therefore, when you say something, what is it that I need to what is the context that I need to take into account before I jump off saying, that offends me or that bothers
Yeah,
me?
yeah.
Um, Living with a hidden disability and some degree of socioeconomic privilege as a US national, that's a very interesting way.
This whole notion in the US, we don't talk a lot about class, right?
Mm.
We have given ourselves a narrative that, oh no, we're a classless society, which
Yeah.
absolutely is like not true. And so I want to, again, just kind of position myself in a place where people can understand, yes, this is part of who I am. I realize I live in a country that has privileged itself in the world
For sure.
around issues of economy and class. So I don't want to run away from my identities. I kind of know who I am. I also live with hidden disabilities, one of which I've had my whole life and really just recently came to understand had been operating in me, and that is I am part of the neurodivergent community.
Mm.
Having grown up, not quite understanding why certain things,
Mhm.
uh, loud noises, being just kind of overactivated, when there's a lot of
Mm.
sensory input, just kind of flooding my space. How that has been living in me in ways that I didn't start to understand until really the research and the discussion and the definition around, what different cognitions look like
Mm.
and how they impact how we show up in the world. So I recently came to understand that, I have been operating in a way that is often described as neurodiverse. It
Mm.
was a huge relief to me to understand that no, there wasn't anything wrong with me because for
Yeah.
many years I felt like, well, oh wow, there must be something wrong with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the other is I'm diabetic, and so
Mm.
again, here in the U.S., I don't know about other parts of the world, but diabetes is recognized as a form of disability. So
Oh, really? Mm.
yeah, yeah, not something you'd
Mhm.
know if
Mm.
I didn't share it.
That's right. That's right. Well, that's very interesting, and that's an educating process. And I just wanted to bring in and honor the fact that we got to meet in this incredible program called the International Gestalt OD and Leadership Development Program. I was privileged enough to learn alongside someone like you, and we have learned through the process and grown and stayed in touch. And one of the things that I was reminded in this description, and we will go further with it, was it was so kind to not just yourself but others. When we describe ourselves with our identities, it
Mm,
sounds like as if you're being kind to yourself
mm.
and you're being generous to others simply by communicating.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. That's part of the I believe the power of a cultural identity. It
Mm,
it first of all says this is who I am. In
mm,
so many places in the world, what seems to be important is what
mm.
we do or what we have
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
And And that, I'm not saying that's not important. I believe my work is important. However, it's not who I am, it's what I do. And
Mm.
so it became really important to me to lead with who I am,
Yes.
because I believe that we have to center our humanity first.
Well said. And two individuals could be doing the same thing, but depending on who they are and what their life experiences has been, could really inform an onlooker, somebody engaging with them as well, to kind of appreciate
Yeah.
what the same doing could mean. So I will go on to talk a little more about this, and in the sense that you talk about she has no religious affiliation, believing strongly that the universe provides. Sukari is the daughter of a Jamaican immigrant father and a South Carolinian mother, and was raised with one sibling in a working class multiracial neighborhood in Los Angeles, California. I suddenly have a very nice, wholesome picture of you, Sukari.
Thank you for that, Bhavna. It was, yeah, to be the daughter of an immigrant, again, something I believe is important to share, because it certainly helped to inform, how I was raised. My dad came from an island nation where the majority of the people on the island looked like him. So
Mm,
he did not bring with him any sense of marginalization around skin tone, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
again, in many parts of the world, skin tone privilege is what allows some people to have access to goods, opportunities, and services, while other
yes,
people have to work a lot harder to achieve that same
yes,
access. And
yeah.
so he raised us, along with my mother, who's from South Carolina here in the US, very kind of Southern worldview,
Mm,
in a household where we did not have a sense of one downness. Um,
mm.
Again, we were I had one sibling raised in Los Angeles, and when I share this piece, in a multiracial neighborhood, people usually think, oh, she's from Los Angeles, she grew up, with Spanish speakers. No, in my neighborhood were first generation Japanese American children.
Oh,
That's,
interesting.
oh yeah, people, they assume, right? Even with that
Assume.
statement, multiracial, California, Los Angeles, you're just up the coast from Mexico, must mean, Mexican American children. We had no Mexican American children in my neighborhood. We had
Interesting.
a large population of first generation Japanese American children that I grew up with, that went to my elementary schools, my secondary schools, mostly Asian Americans. And it was funny. I
Interesting.
remember my mother asking me one day. I think it was probably preschool age, and there was a friend, in the neighborhood. Her name is Kay Nakamura. We still correspond. She's still in Los Angeles. And I remember my mother saying, "How can you and Kay spend so much time playing, and neither one of you all speak the language of the other?"
Oh,
And
wow.
it's one of my earliest memories, and it just kind of stayed with me. This notion that children have to be taught bias, whether intentionally or unintentionally, for it to begin to take root in them.
Yeah.
Um, the things they hear their parents say around the table, or just ways they're interacting, in their social settings. Oh, but we would play for hours. We each had a Barbie doll, and we would play for hours and hours. And I don't ever remember thinking that language was a problem. Um, but again, seeing my mother's mind, she says, I just don't understand. You all play for hours. She doesn't speak English. You don't speak Japanese. You know, yeah. So
Yeah, the
that's
language
that.
of the heart doesn't need any language.
Oh,
And
so well said. So well said.
yeah, yeah, and it's incredible how, children can bring about so much insight and reflection. But also is very telling to say that she's now residing in Northern Virginia. Sukari has been supporting leaders both in the US and abroad for over 20 years. So that kind of gives a segue to your work in the last few years. And then we go on to talk about the kind of work that you do, both in your university association as well as working with organizations and your passion around inclusion and equity and about women. And I have seen that up close and personal. But I'd like for you to talk about your work as well, Sukari, as we segue into caregiver friendly workplaces.
Yeah, yeah. So mostly my work, I would say, in the last several years
Mhm.
has been tied to this theory and model that my colleague and I have developed called fifth
Mhm.
domain coaching.
Yeah.
Um, it is really something we stumbled upon in a conversation just like you and I are having. Amber and I are both coaches. Amber lives on the West Coast of the
Mm.
United States. I'm here on the East Coast. We were just in a telephone conversation one day. We were talking about what we were seeing in our coaching practices. I'm not even
Mm.
sure how it came up, but as we continued to talk, we realized that we were coaching people who were having a very similar experience. This was maybe around 2015, 16. And the experience then was tied to something that had occurred here in the US. The young boy, Trayvon Martin, was shot and killed
Mhm.
in his Florida neighborhood by a
Mm.
man who um, said he was threatening. This is like a 13-year-old kid who had gone out to buy a package of candy and
Mhm.
was walking back home and was really just murdered in the streets by this man who said, "Oh, I felt threatened by this youth." And there was something in his hand. I thought it was a gun. Well, it turns out to be a package of Skittles candy. And it just sent this reverberation through
Mm.
the nation, right? But particularly, it galvanized a feeling
Mm.
among people in the Black community here around how unsafe it is, particularly for Black youth, um, to just even be, going about their regular business in the neighborhoods they lived in. And so
Mm.
we were hearing this in our coaching conversations. We were hearing clients coming and saying things like, I really don't want to talk about executive presence today. I am just so outraged that another Black boy has been, murdered in the streets. There seems to be this belief that, somehow a child of 13 years old, could be threatening to a grown man who certainly approached him in a way that was unprovoked. And, and as we talked about the number of clients, because we each were coaching at that time, a number of clients who were either identified as multiracial or identified as Black or African American or biracial. And on the heels of that was also this nightclub bombing. And it's the Pulse nightclub. It was in Florida as well. Both these two things happened in Florida in the United States. And it was a nightclub frequented by members of the LGBT community. And someone, people were there on a weekend evening, just enjoying themselves, dancing, having a good time. And someone bombed the establishment. And so we were also hearing from members of the LGBTQ community who were part of our client base, how angry and sad and depleted they were feeling, as a result of these things, and that they could not talk about these things in the workplace. They just didn't feel that the people they were working with could understand why on this particular day, after having to hear this news the night before, how they really just couldn't care less about the company's goals, at that time. Not that, they wouldn't get back to, mission critical, issues, but that they were just so hurt and sad and filled with despair, a number of them. And so we were saying, gosh, this is interesting that we're both hearing this, different parts of the country, but we're having clients that are coming to coaching conversations where their formal goals were to, maybe work on, managing up, or again, executive presence is a big one. Some people saying, oh, I've got imposter syndrome, I want to try to get out of that. But the coaching goals, which were typically, rather common and traditional, on these days after these reports of what was happening in society, these clients they just were not interested in these kind of safe and traditional kind of coaching conversations. And so they were using the coaching container to be able to express something that had to do with their own social identity. They were connected as a result of the identities they held. And it got us thinking about, well, what happens, because Amber identifies as biracial, and we started wondering, well, what happens when coaches who have not had these kinds of marginalized experiences are coaching clients who bring this to the coaching conversation? How prepared are they to meet the client where they are, kind of stay with them in the conversation? And so we generated a SurveyMonkey, questionnaire that we were very fortunate to have a number of coach training organizations here in the U.S. send out to their membership, their coaches that are part of their alumni, and just ask coaches, how competent and confident, it's competency and a confidence in being able to do this, do you feel coaching people who have social identity group memberships that are different than your own? And of course, what we found was the majority of respondents said, they hadn't really been trained in this area. None of their coach training had prepared them to really coach people across social identity difference. That in fact, many of the coach training organizations were really telling coaches, as part of the curriculum, don't bring in any aspect of who you are. You're just there to serve the needs of the client. And so who you are doesn't really matter in the coaching relationship, which is bonkers. I mean, when you think about it, of course, who you are as a coach, matters. And so it just started us on this journey. What we realized was that there are 4 kind of traditional domains around which coaches are trained, are formally trained in coach training program. And that's the cognitive domain, the emotional domain, the somatic domain, which has to do with how the client embodies the experience they're sharing, and the spiritual domain. And so we believe there is a fifth domain of coaching, which has to do with social group identity. And so how the client understands themselves in terms of the identities they hold and the social context in which they live. So I feel like I've been talking a long time. Let me stop and pause and see what questions you have.
No, thank you. I think that's very, very insightful because I've been trying to um, retain all the points at which I'd like to double click, as they say these days. For sure, I think what was really top of my mind as you were explaining this concept to me was that truly you've been a systems thinker because you kind of looked at information that came to you and then you said, how is this a part of a larger systemic thing? And what can we do to intervene in the larger system? So your contribution via the fifth domain is about equipping a large number of coaches to be able to intervene at a systemic level at a larger scale. So compliments. That's the way that I see it. And the second thing that I think I was very moved by was that we have these silos of workplaces where workplaces legitimize certain conversations and delegitimize or do not encourage certain parts of ourselves to be brought in, especially things like anger and especially things like, there is no space for things that are not yet fully formed. For example, my view about a new concept that is not fully established needs to be worked with outside the workplace, but I can't talk about it at the workplace. But it is eating away at me.
Yeah.
It does impact me and my productivity and my participation, but I can't talk about it. So I found that to be very telling from a systems thinker or an OD practitioner point of view to say that how can we create opportunities to understand people and the systems they belong to. How would you put this along with the experiences of caregiving and what women feel about caregiving and workplaces, or men feel about caregiving and workplaces, as an extension of the idea? Do you want to take a pause? Is there something? Yeah,
No,
yeah.
well, so it's all again about how do I identify what is important to me, what identify. So in Gestalt language, which of my identities are most figural in the moment, right? So all of the aspects of who I am, I talked about all of these identities as part of my cultural bio. They're not all equally important at the same time, every day. There are some days in which my identity as a woman, there's some days that my identity as a caregiver are more figural. They just kind of stand out. They lead
Nice.
for me, right?
Nice.
Right. So I think what workplaces tend not to do very well is to be able to hold the space for people to let these different aspects ebb and flow in the
Mm,
workplace, and to really want to define a person based on who and how they know them um,
Mm,
in their organizational role, and
mm,
to want to keep conversations just kind of limited or bounded to that part of the identity. Because, you mentioned, anger earlier. Well, anger, fear, and sadness are the three emotions. They kind of travel as a pack. So if you
mm.
see one of these emotions, um, the likelihood is the other two are not far behind. So if
That's
someone shows up with anger, as you mentioned, there's probably some degree of fear, right?
mm,
And sadness, which is what I spoke to, when I talked about this discussion Amber and I were in. Yes, people were showing up as coachees, angry, many of them. And as we worked through that, we didn't run from it as their coach because we had experience with it. What started to surface after that was, this fear that they held for their own children,
yeah,
for the members of their communities. This could happen to any one of them any day, and how sad they were to know this was the reality they were living in. So I think what workplaces don't do very well is to say, I mean, they say, oh, we want you to bring your whole self to work. Well, no, they don't. So anybody listening to this, I want you to be really clear. Don't do that. You do not
mm,
bring your full self to work because they don't want your full self there. They want the part of you that contributes to the goals of the organization. That is what they want. They want the part of you that helps the organization sustain itself, be profitable, or if it's a mission-driven organization, to really help them achieve, mission goal status. So, that you're angry or you're fearful or you're sad about something, maybe that's something you might talk with your one work friend, over lunch. But even that person usually doesn't want to hear too much of it. I'd say, well, we could talk about this today over coffee, but or tea, but I don't. It's not the part of you that I have come to
yeah,
know that I appreciate.
yeah. So I hear this a lot, and I'd like your views about this. So there is a part, there is a changing organization design issue that is coming up, which is there is, some people saying that we need to be increasingly a skills-based organization. So you're talking about just the performative part of the person, the instrument part of the person, and saying that, the rest of you I don't really care about. And just get the performance in, or get the skills in, or get the outcomes in. And increasingly, we are also seeing that organizations are becoming, gig force dependent, which means that people are engaging only for part work and not necessarily the full person. So I would like your help to explore some of these ideas about how workplaces, on one hand, are oriented to be profit oriented, performance oriented, looking at people as skills, uh, you know, gig work. But on the other hand, the needs of us as human beings is to be in communities, to have a sense of belonging, to have an association with purpose. And we need to bridge these two things. How
Mhm.
would
Yeah.
you advise leaders to hold this polarity? I know that's another favorite of yours.
Yeah, well, it is a polarity. I'm glad you referenced it. It's be transactional, be relational, right? So those are the two poles. And in the workplace, the preferred pole is the transactional pole, right? So our transaction is I pay you to come here and perform,
Yeah.
based on the skill set I thought I needed in order to move the organization towards success. That's transactional. And
Yes.
that's the relationship that most organizations
Wish
value.
to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And their culture is built around, how these transactions are
Yes.
occurring. And if they're occurring in a way that promote, the goals toward the mission or profitability, which is a
Mm.
different kind of mission. Um, However, because you've got human beings at the workplace, as
Mm.
you noted, human beings are relational creatures.
Mm.
It is natural for us to want to be in relationship, to want to be seen as contributing to the
Mm.
success of the organization based on our values, um,
Mm.
based on our gifts. It
Mm.
isn't so much a skill set. It's what are the gifts I bring
Yeah.
into this organization that help it to succeed, help it to be successful. And so
Yeah.
managing that polarity, I think, is where organizations could do themselves a really big favor if they could actually see that there are these two poles
Mm.
operating, and that, if they were smart, they would be able to kind of track the benefits of each pole,
Mm-hmm.
understand where their preferred pole, they may be overusing it, right? So the transactional aspects of the organization may be in overuse mode, which means that the organization is, in fact, less productive than it
Mm.
intends to be. And so the way polarities work, generally, as Barry Johnson, who kind of gave us this polarity model, he kind of talked about, when you're getting too much of one pole, what will happen in a system or organization is that it'll get so far down that the energy will shift itself naturally to the other pole. And so
Mm.
now we're kind of out of transactional, we're shifting a little bit to this less preferred pole of relational. And then they'll be there for a little bit, and then it'll shift again. So there's this kind of model that builds on the Johnson model, that uses a meaning making tool called the Polarity Navigator. Great little book on navigating polarities by Emerson and Lewis. It's a really
Mm.
short book, easy to read. And it actually gives organizations a meaning making tool called the Polarity Navigator that lets them explore each polarity, really talk about what are the benefits, of transaction, what are the benefits of relationship, what
Mm.
happens when either pole goes into overuse, so that people can start to think about, okay, yeah, there's nothing wrong with being transactional in the workplace. However, when we're only transactional, when we're overusing this pole, what isn't available to us as an organization because we are not also understanding the benefits of the relational pole and how that might actually give us a little bit more balance if we can see the two poles and determine what they call a transformational third way of being
Mm.
organization. So it's not that you give up all that you value about your preferred pole, and we'll say in this discussion the preferred pole is transactional in the workplace, but what other benefits might accrue if you are also able to bring in some aspects of the less preferred pole, relationship, and develop a third way of being, so that you're using all of the benefits that are available to you to help the organization be successful. It is one of the most powerful organizational tools I have worked with, that can very easily help systems kind of map the polarities that may be keeping them from moving forward in a way they'd like to. Well,
I can immediately see its application to the challenge of and the need for having more women in decision-making positions, right? And if we want women to be in decision-making positions, but so far we find that there is a leaky pipeline to the board or to the CEO positions, what can leaders do in their organizations? Do they see the benefits and its applications? And Sukari, we'll leave that as homework for leaders who are listening to this to figure out how they will do. But I do want to use this time to tap into your wisdom and experience of working with so many teams on the diversity and equity agenda to say what are some of the best practices that you have seen in organizations that have enabled one, women to occupy leadership positions, and two, for individuals, irrespective of whether they are men or women or trans or anywhere on the spectrum, to work alongside their caregiving responsibilities, if you have any examples. Sorry, I asked too many questions in one go. Let's first take what are the best practices that enable women to be successful and reach decision-making positions?
Okay, so I would say that for women or anybody with a marginalized identity, so it could be
Nice.
women, it could be around color, it could be around migration status, it could be around age.
Yes.
Um, you know, it would be to obtain a mentor in the organization, someone who can act as a kind of guide to help
Mm.
people navigate, the politics of the organization and, understand the culture of the organization, to also get themselves a coach,
Mhm.
someone who will be a non-judgmental presence as they
Mhm.
start to do their work around
Mhm.
building their strengths and
Mhm.
building their abilities to use themselves well,
Mhm.
self-advocate, right? And
Mhm.
to identify a sponsor, someone
Mhm.
in the organization who will
Mhm.
mention their name
Mm.
in the rooms where decisions are being made. And as you point out, mostly there are decisions being made by men, but
Yeah.
somebody who will mention their name and say, you know, Pavna really did a great job on that special project. We asked her to work on. She came in under budget. She came in ahead of the timeline, and everybody who worked with her just said she was just so easy to work with, a great collaborator. So that's a sponsor, someone who is going to be there when you are not in the room, but important decisions are being made that can impact your ability to move into leadership positions, to move up in the organization. So these are three different functions that often women, most women that I coach, say, well, I have a mentor. Well, a mentor is fine and good, particularly when
Mhm.
you're new to the organization, or maybe you're new to a specific department or a level of the organization, because they're just going to kind of help well, this is how things are done around here, right? So that's valuable information to have. And I have to constantly be working on the aspects of myself that I want to grow and develop. Well, that's where coaching comes in. You
Mm.
need a place where you can come and share your hopes, your dreams, your fears, right?
Mm. Mm,
with someone who is not going to judge you about it. You don't have to worry if they're going to go back and report to somebody higher in the organization. Well, she feels she's an imposter. She doesn't really even feel like she belongs to be here. You don't, those are not conversations you want to have with peers. You want to have
mm,
them with someone who is going to be supportive of you exploring, what are the root causes of some of these feelings, and how do I achieve the change I want to see in myself, so that this is not baggage that's dragging me down, right?
mm,
Um,
mm,
and then what can be difficult for women, and this came up, Sylvia Hewlett wrote this really very interesting piece of work. She did this research on kind of executive presence and how that shows up, and what it kind of means. But in talking about women getting a sponsor, what can sometimes get in the way of that is because most of the people who are in positions to make decisions that can help women move through the pipeline are men. That if I tap a man in the organization, I ask them to be a sponsor. Well, what that means is we may be having lunch once a month, right? To just kind of
mm,
discuss my progress, discuss, what's going on, maybe get a little bit of advice, from that person. Well, suddenly now you've got these other people in the organization wondering, well, what are Sukari and Rajiv talking about? They go to lunch every month. Is there? And so there was this kind of, I don't know, this other impact that
mm,
could be taken negatively, that didn't just show up, for the women, but sometimes the men would say, I don't know if I'm comfortable being in a role. What if someone, has the suspicions about why we are, spending so much time together? Um,
mm.
and my wife hears about it, or somebody else, and then suddenly we've got this. So the sponsorship role is one, while it's needed, can also come with some concern, and it can make it difficult for women, unless there are at least a couple other women that could also be sponsors, right? So what some
Mm.
of my coaches have done is they said, well, there's actually a couple of women on the leadership team that I think I could tap to be a sponsor. So yeah.
Thank you for that. I think there are two things that I liked, and just to paraphrase, one, I liked how you said that organizations need to be mindful of not just getting women to decision-making positions, but anybody who seems minority or marginalized.
Marginalized.
That could
We
be
don't
women.
use that word minority anymore.
Okay, so
Okay.
marginalized right now. And if we are marginalized, and I think that's very important because today it might be women, but we can discover that there is another dimension of marginalization, and as resilient systems and leaders, we need to be continuously mindful of who is getting marginalized. It might just be that men are getting marginalized over time, and that'll be a day I'd like to see, but that's for another thing. Uh, but we
Well,
don't.
you raised an important point there. I want to just kind of pause you there, because all of us, even those of us with privileged identities, so we'll use men, um, have other identities that are marginalized for them. So for men, often what will start to happen is as they age,
Mm,
they are marginalized in ways they hadn't been when they were kind of, at the height of their career, in
interesting.
midlife. Similarly, here in the US, yes, your privilege as a man can sometimes be overshadowed by the way you are marginalized as someone who is not a US national, who has come from another country, may have come from India. I hear this from a lot of Southeast Asian, colleagues that, I came to this country, I have 3 degrees, and couldn't get anyone because of my accent to believe I would be capable of moving into, a particular leadership
Yes.
role. So this identity thing, we are all many things, and our identities are constantly intersecting to give us different experiences of than people who hold similar identities but have a different set of intersectionality.
Fantastic. And the context is so important because the same set of identities in different contexts could mean different things. So thank you for pausing me there and highlighting the nuance. And I think that's really valuable. So as leaders need to be mindful of the marginalized, and the marginalized in what context and what we are doing for that, and why is that valuable to organizations, because that's how organizations are resilient, and organizations are innovative, and organizations are future ready, I would think, because they're inclusive. I do want to ask you about how would some leaders respond to something like this? Because you said that a good organization would invest in having a mentor, a sponsor, a coach. And some people could say, oh my God, that's a lot of work. Do I really want to make this investment? So help us respond to someone like that.
Nobody is more interested in my advancement than I am.
Okay.
If I am not willing to invest in myself, why should I expect anybody else
Yeah.
would want to invest in me? And
Mm-hmm.
so this question really is about, you know, how do leaders do their work? What is the work of leadership?
Okay.
And am I willing to invest in doing that work so that I can be a more equitable and resilient leader? This
Mm.
whole notion of, what leadership is, a kind of command and control, or
Mm.
in the US here, we've kind of moved away from, well, there's a push to move away from a large body of literature that has helped us understand that diverse workplaces outperform homogenous workplaces. Now,
Mm.
this only occurs, what the literature finally told us is that this only occurs when the organization has invested in the formation of these diverse teams. So you can't just throw a bunch of different people together and say, okay, now go outperform a homogenous team. That doesn't work. You also have to invest the time in saying, well, we've got these differences on this team. Before we task them, again, right? So it's before we ask them to perform transactions, we're going to ask them to do the relationship work among themselves so that when they get to places on the project, that are going to challenge them, right?
Mm.
That the relationship is sound enough for them to do the important work of really
Mm.
kind of debating what might be the best way forward without fearing that the relationship is going to fall apart because we've got some disagreement around the transactional things that we have to be doing in order to achieve the goal. So the literature finally said more than diverse teams outperform homogenous teams. What the literature tells us now is that yes, if the organization has invested in
Mm.
helping the team form itself into, a highly effective team. And so that's, how do you like to work together? What is your communication style? Do you prefer direct communication? Do you prefer a little bit less direct communication? What's important to you about us achieving this goal? Somebody might say,
Yeah.
well, I'm just interested in, getting a next promotion. This is something I really need. Somebody else might say, well, it's going to enable me, to work with people who are outside of my initial, team and learn some other skills. What are the gifts or the strengths you bring? This is so important. So many organizations are just kind of stuck in a deficit mindset. They're only looking for what's wrong, what isn't working, all of that, as opposed to saying, what are your gifts, Bhavna? You're a member
Mm.
of this team. We're going to do this really important work. What are your gifts? What are the strengths you bring to this team?
Mm.
And letting
Mm.
you just be in relationship
Mm.
about what you bring. And then hearing that from these other members of the team, often
Mm.
on a diverse team, people will find, well, we have so much in common. Our values are so similar. Our approaches to how we want this to go are really much closer aligned than we thought, just by looking at the table and being able to track the social identity differences that may be present. So that
Mm.
time has to be devoted up front before a team
Mm.
is asked to perform the task. So we're back
Mm.
now to write the polarity of the transactional and the relational and how this shows up.
Love it. You've given a master class in leadership and what is that organizations can do in this conversation. And I find it fascinating. I think this is a conversation that one must listen to at least twice to kind of fully understand. But love it, Sukari. I would like for you. I know you've shared a lot of material with me personally since I started this journey of recognizing caregivers or building Caregiver Saathi. You have watched and supported me, and I'm very, very grateful for that. Um, you have also shared with me a lot of material about what is it that organizations are doing and what are best practices um, in recognizing caregivers at the workplace. Um, Keeping that aside, if you were to do some blue sky thinking, what's your imagination of workplaces of the future?
Well, I think my blue sky thinking is around uh, equity, inclusion, and accessibility.
Mm.
So, as we've been talking a lot about women and women caregiving, the responsibilities in the workplace, I would be saying to every HR manager, and I am saying this to the HR managers I can get in front of, is you have got to do more to understand the experience that women in perimenopause and menopausal states are experiencing as they are also trying to navigate workplaces. Because
Mm.
this hormonal tsunami that starts to happen for women sometimes as early as their mid to late 30s and then stays with them for years afterwards and
Mm.
impacts their personality. It impacts how they are showing up at home and in the workplace. And really, HR folks have the ability to provide more awareness about what might be happening with these women as they're showing up a little bit differently than people have experienced them before they entered this stage, have more general conversation about
Mm.
why this is happening and how it's impacting women differently. Again, the research is telling us that women of color are having a very different perimenopause and menopausal experience than are their white women colleagues. But all women that are moving through this stage of their life, and if you're in a workplace, you're probably in a workplace during a period of time where this is going to impact you. And so, what are organizations doing? What could they be doing to help support women in navigating this part of their life's journey? This is a very natural part of a woman's journey, specifically as she moves through her life. And she sees it at home. Her family experiences it. I remember my daughter saying to me, "Oh, for God's sake, Mom, for about 10 years, you were just crazy. I just couldn't even I didn't even know what was going on with you. You were such a different person." Well, it was also showing up in the workplace. But I wasn't aware because we didn't have the research. It was always, oh, she's it was always something whispered about that you didn't talk about, that there was this kind of politeness protocol around it that we now know only does harm. Silence is violence. We have to talk about these things so that they can be legitimized, so that they can come out of the closet, and we can help women who need the support to navigate while they are transitioning.
Let's continue with the blue sky thinking. What is it that you wish for organizations of the future to have that they probably don't have today?
Just an attention to how they are designing their organization, so that they are more equitable. They are more inclusive. They are more accessible in ways that a lot of organizations don't even consider accessibility. That they are designing their organizations to see, appreciate, and value the gifts that each individual brings to the organization. I think this deficit mindset, where we're only tracking the things someone does wrong or they're not good at, let's start with, what are your gifts? How do those gifts help us succeed? And because I understand that these gifts are going to make us a better organization, what kind of support, what kind of design do we need to have so that it is a more human-centered space? There, again, I want people to hear, I get that organizations exist for a reason, either to achieve a mission or to make money, to build profit. And so we're not saying, oh, throw all of that out. We don't want that. No, we're saying it's also and. Could I be more profitable? Could I be more successful in achieving the mission if instead of being so focused on a quote unquote skill set, I actually invited people to talk to me about the gifts they bring? And when people feel supported, then they will have a sense of belonging. It will make them more loyal to the organization because they will feel the investment in a different way than whether or not my skill set, is the right skill set for a particular job. The reality is most people can learn to do just about anything if you teach them how to do it.
That's right.
So I might not have the skill set when I walked in the door, but if you feel I've got the gift and the ability to learn, then who knows what else I might contribute? We never know where in the organization that really innovative idea is going to come from.
That's
It could
right.
come from the administrative assistant, not necessarily the person leading the leadership team.
Yeah.
Everybody has a broader life outside of the organization. Maybe that administrative assistant is actually, the chair of their local community, organization. Maybe they are leading someplace else in their life, but because you never bothered to ask them, what else can you do except, take notes in the meeting and get coffee, maybe I never get the benefit of their
Mm,
leadership experience. Maybe
yeah.
they're the leader in their child's school organization. We don't
Mm,
know, because in the workplace, we put you in this bucket. Oh, you get the coffee, you set up the appointments. You never even say, Sukari, what else do you do in your life? So
mm,
tell me a little bit more about you. What do you consider your gifts? Well, my
mm,
true gift is an organization. I'm a really great
mm.
organizer. I mean, I can pull things together very quickly. I have a large network. Da, 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 da. All of these things people could be bringing to help the organization be more successful. But because we keep people in these boxes in their assigned roles or level of hierarchy in organization, really organizations are leaving good ideas and money on the table because they're so restricted in the way they think about people.
Your passion is palpable, and you make a very compelling case. I have nothing more to add to that. I think amen to that. And like they say, tathastu in Sanskrit, or so be it. May there be many more organizations that are willing to look at the abundance and the gifts that people bring. I think that's such a beautiful way to go past the scarcity mindset, and to really let our humanity show up, the possibilities of human potential show up. I I think we should pause this conversation for now here, because I think it's a lovely place to stop.
Well, I want to thank you again for inviting me. It's always an honor when someone thinks I have something to share that could be helpful. Uh, I have, as you said, been a supporter of Caregiver Saathi from the very beginning. It was
Yes.
just a little kernel of an idea in your mind, and to see how it's grown and it's expanded its influence into the world. It just feels very powerful to me, Bhavna, and so I'm grateful to have been invited to be part of this journey.
I'm so grateful to have a Sathi like you for Caregiver Saathi. And like I say, caregivers also need care, and caregivers need Sathis. And I'm very grateful to have a friend and a professional colleague and a thought leader like you investing her time and energy in exploring some of these ideas and helping get across to so many others. I hope that many will benefit from this conversation. I'm grateful that you got up on a December morning and invested your precious December replenishment time in helping us see and learn so many things from you. Very grateful, Sukari.
Well, I've learned as well. So thank you for inviting the conversation. It's got me thinking about other things.
And we will have a follow-up conversation on that. But for now, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching this episode of Future Fit Corporates. If today's conversation resonated with you, don't let it end here. Join the Future Fit Corporates Club or the FFC Club. Explore our full dossier and discover powerful blogs from our past speakers. Let's move beyond inclusion as a buzzword. Let's make diverse experiences, especially experiences of caring for others, caregiving, a leadership strength. Together, we can truly build not just a caring world, but future-fit workplaces. Until next time, take care and let's keep the conversation on.